Okay, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year to those of you online and in person who haven't seen until tonight. And welcome to tonight's Children Education Policy and Accountability Committee. We are having, it's that time of year, a themed meeting on the budget. Before we start, I'm just going to go through housekeeping as ever. So this is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, we have lots of people who have their wits about them who will direct us to the exits. And just a note to introduce yourself before speaking. Apologies for absence. We've had an apology received from Councillor Campbell-Simon, who's unable to attend, and to note that Councillor Darryl Brown will be joining us and is joining us online. And also that Councillor Mercy Ume has had a clash with the licensing subcommittee, but is very valiantly going to maybe sort of dash and try and join the meeting when she can. So we move to item 2. I know this is always a chunky kind of meeting in terms of the content, so I'll try and keep this as swift and trim around that as possible. So item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? Want to declare? No. Minutes. Do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2024 as an accurate record? Okay, thank you very much. Agreed. Okay, so we get to the meat of the meeting, the 2025-26 revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy. So I will first invite Councillor Rowan Ree to give an overview of the medium-term financial strategy. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for inviting me here to talk through the budget. I can't quite believe it's been a whole year since we were here discussing last year's budget, but time flies when you're enjoying yourself, I suppose. Okie doke. So I'm going to talk through the slides we have here. I know you've all had a chance to read the report before the meeting, but this really does just try and summarise the budget overall, and then we're going to hear from Jackie, from Tony in the department about the specific areas relevant to this committee. So just as part of this presentation, you can see the contents there. This is just what we're going to be talking through at quite a high level, and then we'll feed into the more specific elements. So just to sort of set the scene for the revenue budget here in Hammersmith and Fulham, we have a net general fund budget of £221 million. So in the grander scheme of things, you know, it's not a huge amount of money, and there's an awful lot that we need to do with it. I say it's not a huge amount of money. Our revenue funding has been cut from 164 million in 2010 to 132 million pounds this year. That's a real terms cut of 53%. But despite that, you know, we are still expected to carry on providing services that residents need, all the statutory services. Here in Hammersmith and Fulham, we've gone beyond that. We've provided a range of new services that are unique to Hammersmith and Fulham, things like funding-free home care for those who need it, funding-free school breakfasts, our unique law enforcement team that keep the borough's streets safe and clean, and things like our council tax support scheme, which provides comprehensive support for those most vulnerable residents who struggle to pay their bills. Now, it's getting harder and harder every year to put together a budget, partly because of the decreasing, what for a long time has been a decreasing revenue grant from central government, but also because of changing demographics and the sluggish state of the national economy over the last decade and a half. So changing demographics mean that the population is getting older. Older residents often rely on council services more. Similarly, when the economy isn't in a particularly good state, people have less money and rely on council services to support them. So we are seeing quite a bit of pressure on council spending as a result of this. That said, this year we were pleased to have a little bit of extra relief from central government as part of the local government financial settlement. You'll see on the slide just a couple of bits and pieces that we were given in the budget that we're very grateful to receive. The extra £2 billion social care, the extra £1 billion from the Household Support Fund, something that was extended in the early days of the new government. The extended producer responsibility, that was over £1 billion for local government. Yes.
Yeah, not just us.
No, we weren't given £1 billion because our budget is £221 million. Sorry, I thought that. Okay. So you can see the list of extra grants that we were given there, and that's all helpful in terms of balancing a budget and providing the services that the residents need. So what is it that we're trying to do when we put the budget together? Obviously, we've got a number of objectives that we're looking to meet. First and foremost, the most important thing for any level of government is keeping the public safe. So looking after the safety of our residents, businesses, and visitors to the borough. I mentioned the statutory services and then those extra services that residents of Hammersmith and Fulham value so much. We want to do whatever we can to try and protect those. We want to try and, I know growth is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but we want to grow the pie. We want to make sure that the borough is as prosperous as possible. You know, the more prosperous the borough is, the more revenue that we can take in through taxation, and therefore we can support those services better through that. We want to make sure that the council itself is as efficient and as effective as possible. So there's investment in the way that we operate, and we're constantly reviewing the way that budgets are managed and teams work. As part of that, we're making sure that the governance, the systems and controls across the council are as strong as possible, and that we're putting money aside for a rainy day as part of our reserve strategy, and we're able to meet any potential pressures that come up in the future. Finally, but certainly not least importantly, we're very proud in this borough to have one of the lowest tax rates in the country. That's something that we're looking to preserve, and we're very pleased that we're able to keep tax rates low at a time when people are struggling so much. So if you can move to the headlines of this budget, right? What is it that this budget does? This is a budget to fund the fight against crime and antisocial behaviour here in Hammersmith and Fulham, with record investment in measures to keep the community safe. We're investing in our law enforcement team, our innovative gangs unit. We're putting extra money into preventing violence against women and girls. But as someone said, yeah, it's not enough to be tough on crime, you need to be tough on the causes of crime as well. That's why we're investing in our school attendance strategy to keep children in school rather than making mischief or getting into trouble. With our digital inclusion strategy, we're making sure that people across the borough are aware of the risk of the fastest growing crime in the country, and that's fraud. I mentioned earlier about the increasing pressure that we're seeing on the services that the council provides. So this budget relieves some of the pressures on our statutory services with new funding for adult social care, for children's services, for homeless prevention, and for our waste collection services. And there's also additional money for important projects like Upstream, which is going to generate huge prosperity across the borough, for preventing climate change and improving sports facilities around the borough. So this is a bit of an overview of the budget. Obviously, we're taking into account things like inflation, which is added to pay and to contract prices as part of the budget. We've got that £12.3 million of new investment, which we'll cover in a bit more detail in a moment. We've got some other costs, and then the income for the savings that the council has made, whether that's an increase in the tax base, improvements in the collection fund, the increase in government grants, or efficiencies that we've been able to make to the way that the council operates. So the investment proposals that we're making this year, as you'll see, the most significant of those, as I talked about, is around community safety, with an extra £3.4 million going towards the law enforcement team, the gangs unit, preventing violence against women and girls. But as well as that, we have fairly hefty new investment in adult services, making sure that those services are able to keep up with the increasing demand, and something I'm sure this committee will be particularly interested in, £2.2 million of new investment in children's services. In terms of savings, we've strived to find efficiencies across the council. I want to thank all of the officers and the cabinet members who've worked so hard to find new savings every year. I know it gets harder as the low-hanging fruit has been picked years ago, but we are a constantly evolving council. We're constantly trying to find the most effective and efficient ways to provide services, so that not only do residents get the best service from the council, but they get it at the best price as well. So there you can see over £5 million of savings that we found within the year. As part of this budget, we will be increasing council tax by 2.99%, as well as taking the social care precept. So that still makes us the third lowest council tax rate in the country. The additional council tax is, for an average property, an extra 88 pence a week. I appreciate that that lots of people are struggling, but that's an increase that's far smaller than lots of other bills that they'll be paying at the moment. But for those who are least able to pay, we have one of, I think, the most comprehensive council tax support schemes in the country. 4 in every 10 households across the borough receive some sort of discount, and we're one of only 3 London councils that provide 100% support for the most vulnerable residents. So those least able to pay the least. Finally, we've got a bit of a breakdown of how the new spending is allocated across the various departments. So children's services part of the people department, so an extra £5 million of growth spending there, as well as £3.5 million of inflationary spending to keep track with rising prices. I think, we're all aware of the residual risks that local authorities face, constant changes to local government funding, potentially in the future, new legislation and new burdens that local government is constantly expected to take on. These are all things that we're aware of and that we're monitoring closely so that we can adjust budgets where need be. I think one thing it is worth mentioning is that we do include quite substantial contingency planning into budget setting. So where these risks do arise, we're well placed to be able to meet them. And that brings me quite neatly to the reserve forecast for the council. For the last 2 years, this council has run a budget surplus. So we've been adding money into our reserves at a time when most councils have been taking money out just to balance the books. You can see there a breakdown of both our general balances. This is the day-to-day rainy day fund, as I like to think of it, as well as earmarked reserves. This is money that we put aside over the years to smooth larger spending proposals over a number of years, so that we're not looking for large sums at the last minute. We've got a slide there on the medium-term financial forecast. So obviously, when we're looking at budgets, we don't just look at the 1 year. We're both looking back and forwards. And so we're already planning for 28 to 29. You'll see in the papers that wherever there are savings or growth, this will be reflected in budgets for a number of years to come. Obviously, the budget gap at the bottom is what we have to close every year. This year, we started the process with a budget gap of £18.5 million, and we're already taking measures, looking at ways to close that gap over the coming years. And the final slide on our MTFS strategy just shows how we're doing that. So that's through promoting economic growth, as I mentioned earlier, to boost revenue in the future. Transformation programs across the council, increased use of digital services and new technology to make sure that we're able to operate as effectively as possible. The generation of community infrastructure levy in Section 106 resources, and securing resources through national programs. Also, I think as an ongoing thing, we're constantly looking for the most efficient way to run services, and we've managed to save £133 million over the course of this administration over the last 10 years. So the last slide just goes through the next steps for this budget. We'll be going to all of the PAC meetings. This is the first, and my favourite, so I wanted to come here first. So we'll be for the rest of January and the start of February. We'll be going to various PAC meetings and the Policy Oversight Board. The final budget will be taken to Cabinet on the 10th of February, and then we'll all get a chance to talk about it again at Budget Council on the 26th of February. I'll now hand over to officers to go through some of the more specific steps for children's services.
Sorry, I didn't realise it was us. I thought it was James.
No, that's the corporate overview. You could either take questions now or
Let's do that, and then we'll just take a couple, and then you people can find slides and stuff. But thank you for the roadshow starting here tonight. That's thrilling. We did have one question here. Nandini, did you want to open?
I think it was more not a question. You mentioned something called upstream, and I wanted to stop you there and ask you what upstream meant.
Oh, of course, yeah. Very happy to answer that. Upstream is our local industrial strategy. So Hammersmith and Fulham has been working with Imperial College, who have got a base in the north of the borough. And that's it's to attract research and technology, life science businesses into the area. So they get the benefit of the research that's going on at Imperial College. The council is able to provide support as well, whether that's through providing space for new businesses. As part of this, we've generated £6 billion already of inward investment with companies like Novartis, L'Oreal and NATO moving up to White City. And we've created 13,000 jobs as a result of this. So the first step, I think, is getting investment in, making sure that this is a hub for the cutting edge research that's going on up there. And this council's role going forward, I think, will be to make sure that growth is inclusive and is shared across the borough, to make sure children growing up in Hammersmith and Fulham get to take advantage of all the exciting stuff that's going on here in White City.
Great, thank you. I had James, you next or no?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm handing over to you.
Thank you.
Great,
And
thank
Jackie McShannon again, Director of Children's Services and Executive Director of People. Thank you. Should we move on to the? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. So we became a people services last summer, and that was an opportunity to refresh and reinvigorate our vision to ensure that we were all speaking to the same common rubric and purpose. You will be surprised to know that our values remain as ever. That children and young people are at the heart of everything we do, and listening to and acting on their voices is the cornerstone and foundation of everything we do, which was illustrated really at our last CPAC when we had the fantastic youth voice and that whole multimodal approach. And of course, that co-production and working with parents, carers to help the design, the delivery, the evolution of services is critical, as we want to build resilience, not just for individual children, but for their families and for the wider community. Another key element is intervening early to identify and respond to needs in a timely way across the whole system. And that is for children with special education needs and disabilities, for families with additional needs, and indeed for children where there is a potential for family breakdown, and we want to sustain families where possible. In short, we operate a culture of humility, respect for individuals, of equity, equality and inclusion, to create an economy, a children's economy that delivers excellence for all children. That's really critical, and that will be a sort of recurrent theme throughout this presentation, because all our children matter. So we'll move on, please. Thank you. Delivering the right provision, the right time to meet needs locally has been part of our strategy, which is, as I said, we work to very high principles, And these principles are both professional, but I'm really happy to say also mandated and even demanded by our politicians. I'm very proud to work in a borough where there is an alignment between that political and corporate support and those professional values and ethos that we hold very dear. And actually, for us, there is no separation between financial probity and strengthening our practice. And it was something that Sarah, who's our new Interim Director of Children and Young People's Services, reminded me of earlier today, that actually the two go hand in hand. And over the last few years, we have demonstrated that we can reform services, that we can deliver efficiencies, and that we can reduce and manage spend while delivering continuous improvement and strengthened practice. That we've done that through a series of deep dives, of constant review and evaluation of efficacy. And it really requires us to be courageous and not to hang on to outmoded practice, but to be thinking differently and thinking always ahead of the curve. I'm mixing my metaphors, but you get the point. And actually, we welcome, we invite the challenge and the conversations, dynamic conversations with all our partners across the piece, whether parents and carers or statutory partners, voluntary and community sector. Underpinning that is a resolute focus on quality assurance and performance management to ensure that, again, that our practice is meeting needs and that every pound spent is wisely. We have a very mature quality assurance system, which is now embedded across children. So there were, a few years ago, it was stronger in some areas, but I'm really happy to say that we've really strengthened that across the piece. We're proud leaders of a fantastic workforce. We say often that they are our most privileged and prized asset. And over the last few years, we've invested in growing our capacity in the workforce development, in nurturing talent and offering career progression opportunities, and also attending to our staff's welfare and well-being, because we believe that resilient staff also contribute to resilient communities. And actually, just if I may, this year, two of our leaders won awards, Social Worker of the Year award, one of our social workers at Front Door, and a team manager in Leaving Care Service won Silver Team Manager of the Year award, and we are very, very proud of that. But essentially, we are focused on ensuring that our children receive the right service. And as I said, that requires us to always be thinking and understanding our systems, what we're doing, what the impact is, and whether we are actually making a real difference to children and young people. Thank you. So I don't want to go through these line by line, but Chair, if I may prevail on Debbie to maybe insert them in the minutes so that because I do want to have them highlighted. I just want to just point to a few sort of underpinning principles. So I think what we've achieved across the piece demonstrates that we are committed to a culture of excellence and ambition for all children, whether it's universal services targeted or and specialist service. So there's no area left unattended to, and that's part of that continual review and self-evaluation. The theme of early intervention to deliver the optimal outcomes for children and young people, again, underpins what we've achieved in special education needs and disabilities, in our family support and early help, in our enhanced offer to, for example, young carers. The third element is that working in partnership and collaboration. And again, at the last CPAC, you heard about our family hubs. We're so proud to have delivered 3 family hubs this year with 125 partners delivering 87 services on a weekly basis. It's very strong. And we continue to evolve that offer. It's with our partners, and we have family voices. We have lots of different ways of hearing from children, young people, and other service and community users. We've just launched a social media, and And again, that's throwing up interesting information about some demographics prefer online information, others prefer it printed. I won't say where I sit. But again, it's about evolving just our reach and our conversations and being open to challenge. And if I haven't said that before, I think that's really important because we have to be dynamic and we have to allow other people's views. So the other point I want to make here is that we influence not just our own practice, but the wider system. And we do that through fantastic partners, our schools, for example, working with them to enhance what they already do to deliver more inclusive and equality of opportunity services. But actually, we have taken on responsibility for innovating, for example, our fostering hubs, where we are leading on behalf of a new model across Northwest London and a new model of support to our foster carers who, again, are very prized assets. We also have stepped up to lead on, for example, an improved, enhanced offer for care leavers across London. And this authority was one of the first to adopt care experience as a protected characteristic. Nandini, you asked about upstream. Again, that Children's is very linked in, very supported to upstream and looking at opportunities for all our children and as they become adults. So it doesn't just stop at 18 or 25. I could talk about individual pieces there. I just wanted to highlight the safety valve because I think that safety valve really is an example of how you can achieve transformation, financial efficiency, and continue to strengthen practice. It's not easy. I wouldn't want Councillor Reid to think that it didn't involve a certain amount of angst and hard work. It continues to be a challenge, and I'll just talk about that in a moment. And finally, when Children's Services received the outstanding rating, what really mattered to us is that the inspectors found that our work is impactful. It makes a real tangible difference to children and young people. And to know, it's really heartwarming to know that actually what you do does have that influence and impact on children, empowering children to thrive. One of the quotes for our virtual school was an unwavering laser focus, and I nearly said lazy focus, but actually an unwavering laser focus. And actually, I think that wonderful, well-deserved credit to the virtual school is also something that works across all children's services. And the point here is this has been achieved by a whole system, not by one person or one service. So Councillor Ree talked about the challenges and mitigations, and I won't repeat them. We have some local issues, which are actually we share with London around changing demographics, and that impacts on our funding. And today, Tony, Peter and I were at the Schools Forum, and we talked about that impact for our schools. I won't repeat the cost of living concerns, and also a number of nationally recognised challenges. So we know that meeting the needs of children with special education needs and disabilities who have got increased complexity and increased presentation, and we want to meet those needs, but we do know that that nationally there is not enough, I think it's fair to say, funding within the system. And also we want to be able to organise ourselves to meet those needs earlier in inclusive environments. And I think that despite those challenges, the work that Peter, the team have done with schools, with our partners, with Parents Active in transforming services has been critical. I am just going to touch on the social care reforms as we move to the next slide. It's part of our priorities moving forward. So these are nationally mandated reforms. And actually, in many ways, Hammersmith and Fulham is already implementing those because they privilege relational-based practice, they privilege listening and co-producing, and they privilege compassion and care. And again, it's just a great privilege for me to work in children's services where that is also supported by the investment that our political and corporate leaders have given to children's. We continue to be grateful for that, but to use that money very wisely. I think councillors has I think you've already identified where we are intending to focus our growth next year. So I hope that I have been brief enough, because I would love to talk forever all evening about children's services. But just to say that we remain ambitious, we remain aspirational and steadfast in our determination that the whole system works together to benefit outcomes for children and young people, so that they have excellent experiences and excellent life and enhanced life chances. So I'm going to hand over to Tony, who's going to talk through some of the numbers.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm Tony Burton. I'm the Head of Finance for Children's Services and Education. On the screen, you have a couple of summary tables of the Children's Services budget proposed for 25-26. The second table just highlights the high-level changes from the current year to next year. So you'll see an overall increase in the net controllable budget from 53.25 million to 54.88 million, and that's really as a result of both the investment in growth and the additions to the budget around pay and contract inflation. The growth noted on the slide here is just under 1.4 million. I think you may have noted that in the previous presentation, it referred to 2.2 million. The difference is an additional investment in the delivery of the legislation around the social care reform, children's social care reform. So 1.4 million and an additional 800,000 specifically related to the reform agenda. You may also note in the detailed table at the top, we have a much larger gross expenditure budget, much of that being in education and special education needs disability. A large proportion of that 126 million there, 38 million of that is delegated to our mainstream maintained schools. And there's just under 40 million in that budget for expenditure from the dedicated schools grant high needs block for special educational needs. There's quite a lot of detail there, but happy to answer any questions on the budget or on the detail in the PACs.
Great, thank you very much. Would any of the committee members like to open with any particular questions, including those online? Otherwise, I have one. Always trying not to invoke my chair's privilege too much. Nadine.
Can you talk a bit more about the safety valve arrangements? Like, what is the impact or soft impact as well? And
yes, thank you. And I think we've probably talked in previous CPACs, but always glad to, and Peter can chip in as well. So I think we have used the safety valve to accelerate what was already a transformation program. And again, when I talked about wanting to refresh what we do and understanding how well it's working for children and young people, we had, before the formal safety valve partnership with the DFE, we certainly were working up some transformation to look at how we could provide more effective early intervention services. So to offer, for example, speech and language therapies, to identify in the early years sector how they could continue to be more inclusive, looking at the development, the staff development, professional development, so that we're skilling up everybody, for example, to respond to children who have speech and language needs, our speech and language and communication needs, being aware of an alert to a response to children with autistic spectrum condition. So just we have invested general fund in that offer. I think we've talked before about the Autism Education Trust work and the joint communication team. We've also created a local authority SENCO to work with our schools, and again, just to help be clear about the offer. So one of the things we have developed in the last few years is an overarching SEND strategy, and from that flows a number of key documents and strategies, including alternative provision, the direct payments for and very importantly, the ordinarily available offer, so that actually parents, carers, schools, young people can expect to receive a consistent offer across the piece. Now, we understand our schools are working very hard to be inclusive. We also understand that they have enormous pressures on them, and it's beholden on us to, as a partnership, as a collective, to work together to develop the skills and to create the capacity across the whole system to meet need. And we are seeing an increase in complex presentations. So the safety valve is, in a sense, a shorthand, but we are operating our own transformation program that underpins that. And I guess when we set out on the safety valve, we were very clear that we wanted to offer excellent services and not to compromise on those. And that was a very clear mandate from the leader of the council.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. I have a couple of questions. I wondered if one of you could tell us a bit more about the Children's Social Care Prevention grants, although that might be, I don't know how impactful that's, how big a thing that is, but I was curious.
So I'm going to start and Sarah will come in a bit. It's very new and we don't actually know the grant conditions, but it's attached to the social care reforms, which were announced, I think it was the 17th of December. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah if you introduce you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sarah Sanderson, Interim Operational Director of Children and Young People Services. So as Jackie said, the preventative grant is a new grant, and at this stage, we're not clear about what the grant, or we're waiting for clarity regarding the grant conditions. In the interim, what we're doing is, and I think Jackie referred to it earlier, is that we know that the way we work in Children and Young People Services and across children's services in Hammersmith and Fulham is in line with the spirit of the reform agenda. So we're we're an organisation underpinned by systemic principles. We work with families in a family-led plans, and we've progressed with our Safeguarding Family Group conferences, our broader family group conference work, utilising the capacity we have within our social work teams. We work in focus family-led plans, which is one of the key principles of the reform agenda. We know we operate within a safe system that's effective, and I won't go over what Jackie's outlined in terms of the achievements and the outcomes for children. However, we're very clear that we want to implement the reforms in a planned way, informed by continuing to maintain a safe and stable system where we've been able to retain a really strong qualified social workforce who we value. And what we want to do is work with our workforce and our families to consider the pace of change and how we align ourselves with those reform expectations, which are very new in terms of being published for us.
So actually, Councillor, we'd be delighted to come back at a later stage once we've understood the timescales and the requirements in more detail. Sarah did talk about our workforce and how we've nurtured it. I also talked about it. The figure I forgot to quote the Councillor is that we in children's social care, our agency usage is at 5 to 6%, which is extraordinarily low, and really is a function of all those elements that I described that have been put in to support the workforce. And that is good news for children. It's good news for children and families because having that churn of practitioner is very, very difficult. The social care reforms hope to reduce that by a different model and having a lead professional that stays with a family, which we will want to try and honour, but ensuring that we retain those high level skills and that consistency of standard that has been so carefully nurtured.
And the other part to add around that is that our multi-agency working with families is very strong. Our partnerships are very well embedded and strong. The reforms focus on really strengthening those partnerships, looking at how teams operate in a multi-agency way. And that, in terms of thinking about the preventative grant, we're in the process of engaging with our partners around how those other partners are funded as part of the reform agenda and how we work together to make those changes.
Great. Oh, did you want to come in? No. I noted when I briefly looked into it that it was based on research that had been undertaken. What's your understanding of the kind of headlines of that, or what direction they're trying to go in?
So it's based on a review which is called Stable Homes Built on Love, and which was published I think 23, and looked very much on, again, how we can develop that resilience of families so that children can safely and remain at home and thrive and have their needs met in that earlier optimal way. And when I talked about our principles and our priorities and what's underpinning our work, that's why I emphasised those, because actually I think that we are very compliant with the spirit of the new reforms.
If you wanted to.
Sorry, and just to add in there, because it's referenced in the papers, is actually investing in models to support families, children to remain within their families. So working with their parents, particularly adolescents, and looking at how we use our resource there, which is why we're confident that our practice is in line with the reform agenda, which was informed by the National Care Review.
And some of the growth that Councillor Ree is referred to is that we're continuing to innovate and pilot that, as Sarah talked about, that family enhancement, the group conferences, opportunities for families and social workers and other practitioners to work together in hopefully will feel an empowering way and will strengthen families.
Would you anticipate they will want, like with other government reforms, will want some original kind of pilot sites to, would you say we primed?
So we've piloted the family network aspect, which might not be going forward, in fact, which is about working with families to come up with creative solutions to support them to care for their children. The fostering network is again consistent with that. We weren't one of the large pathfinders. There are two in London, and there is some learning, but it is quite preliminary. And one of the reasons for Sarah and my shared caution is that while some of the pathfinders are obviously very promising, they haven't been embedded for a long time. So we do need to just understand where structural change is going to take place, and particularly in London, and the issues around capacity of partner agencies to be part of that fully, to ensure that the offer across London is consistent.
Great, thank you. That's very illuminating. Thank you very much. Did you want to come in?
I had a question on the budget lines, which is 11.94 million, and just if somebody can expand on that, if that has gone up or down, and what exactly is that used for?
You have the reference, please.
So it's children's services budget is 65.974 million, and within this sum, the 11.9 million are for budget lines over which the service has little control. So I just want to know this non-controllable, page 15. So it's the summary budget 2025-26, that table there. Perhaps this is a question for Councillor Ree. What exactly, if you can expand on the budget lines, which is the uncontrollable corporate services and capital charges, and what exactly does that include, and has it gone up this year?
So a significant proportion of that will be capital charges, which is the depreciation of capital assets. So that's the sort of we call it uncontrollable because it's an accounting adjustment to account for the depreciation of assets. It will also include the corporate overhead. So, for example, things like the finance service, HR, and those sort of core corporate services that are recharged out to frontline departments. So, in terms of the change year on year,
yeah, they would go up by things like pay inflation. So, support services are things like finance, HR, payroll, things like that, and they're primarily staffing-driven sort of services. What in terms of to comply with CIPFA, Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy kind of best practice, we recharge frontline services for that. So all the services, children's, adults, public realm, environment, housing, they all get a share of the support service recharges, basically.
So for example, the HR service may be recharged to children's services based on headcount. So we would receive a share of those costs based on our proportion of the overall organisational headcount. And that's, as James says, it's a CIPFA accounting best practice to account for the full cost of services. So an apportionment of those corporate overheads to frontline services.
And this has gone up over the last.
It probably would have. So it depends on the number of people in all of the services. So clearly, all services have to make savings. You know, all services have to make savings over. So there would have been reductions for kind of where we've driven savings out, but there would be increases where pay inflation brings uplifts or you know the cost of the remaining staff. So it would probably have gone up marginally over time to reflect things like that. But there have also been sizable savings. So you know I can provide that separately to sort of. You know, in terms of analysis of those support services, but yeah.
And depreciation obviously increases with capital investment. So as over the last couple of years, as we've increased capital expenditure on our schools estate, which is maintained schools assets are part of the local authority asset base, those assets are depreciated. So as our capital expenditure on the schools estate increases, we'd expect to receive those depreciation charges over a number of years following that capital investment.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just come in on that one as well? Thank you very much. I think that's a really good explanation of why those lines are in there. You know, as you can see from the budget presentation, we've provided an extra 2% for pay inflation. That's one of the major drivers of cost changes in this area. Obviously, over the last few years, inflation has been pretty difficult to predict. You know, back in 2022, we were at 11.1% inflation because of Liz Truss and her mini budget. Right, we're in a much more stable position now, and we're hoping that in the years to come, we're going to be able to keep inflation increases around about the 2%, which is the Bank of England target. If you look at the Annex 1 and 2, there you'll see the changes that the controllable changes that we've made. In the budget this year, you'll see £1.393 million of additional growth spending and £1.153 million of efficiencies made. So even at a time when public finances are tight, we have managed to provide an extra £250,000 for the service, which I'm really proud to have done.
Thank you, Nadia.
I mean, travel care and support seems to always put a lot of pressure on the budget. Why is this so? And is it because of the increased demand for education healthcare plans? And travel care and support is also shown as a saving. So how is both? There is a demand, there is also a potential for savings in that area. You may say contract retendering and independent travel training.
Yeah.
Is that happening in reality, and
Yes.
what is the situation on that?
So in terms of the growth, you'll see there's 590,000 of growth, and that's principally around what you described around EHCP growth. So a greater number of young people being supported within EHCP who require home to school transport. So that's the growth element, and as you say, there are corresponding savings. About 3/4 of that £200,000 saving relate to the unit cost reduction as a result of the bus contract retender. So that there's a significant saving on obviously it's linked to volumes, but is driven by the recontracting retender process, and about a quarter of that saving relates to ongoing the ongoing impact of travel tech training, which is extensive but tends to have a lesser impact on the budget.
So it's also worth noting that travel care is not just for EHCs, it's also for SEN support as well. So even if you see a flatter kind of growth in terms of EHCs, you may not see the same sort of flattening in terms of actual travel care numbers.
Thank you. And Nandini, it is one of the areas that we keep reviewing because it is a very high spend and high cost area. We are seeing increased complexity of need. It also relates to our SEN sufficiency. So when I talked about needing to look at what we do and check that we've got the right provision, ensuring that we've got the right number of placements to meet the needs of children in Borough is a key priority for next year.
I mean, coming back to safety valve somehow, and I can never get that out of my head. And I think we are also going to be, I think there's a research going on about the impact of safety valve as well. And I think they will be talking to Parents Active in due course. I mean, the safety valve is historic spend on education healthcare plans where you issued a lot of education and that is an arrangement for historic spend, but still the demand for education healthcare plans is increasing, is it? I mean, is the growth increasing, or despite all the proposals you're doing and all the transformation programs and speech and language therapy, etc., you still find the demand for education healthcare plans growing or not?
It's slowed down. I think it's fair to say that, so we are beginning to see the impact of having that earlier revised offer and to have that sort of skilling up and clarity of expectations across the system that I talked about with the ordinarily available offer and with the investment in schools. And again, working with our great schools to build on what they're already doing and to ensure that they've got the support and the capacity to do it. But we are seeing, as I said, increased complexity of need. And we're still seeing, I've said this for a few years, but I think it's still true that we're still seeing that impact of COVID on some of the development, the school readiness and the needs of our younger children. Sorry, Peter.
No, it's okay. So I think, yeah, so in real terms, we're seeing it's a much flatter kind of viewpoint moving forwards. However, that's partly not necessarily due to decreased need coming into the system. It's also due to kind of improving the quality of casework, particularly in the upper age groups in terms of the young people. So it's hard to give a longer term prediction because the trend has not run for a very long time. But what Jackie's saying is absolutely correct. In terms of real numbers, the growth is definitely reducing. The second point has just slightly escaped me for a second, so I'll come back to it. Apologies.
So we're just the national trajectory is continued growth, and actually there is a national issue about how we as a nation identify and meet the needs of our children and young people, and we do hope that we will see some transformation nationally in the way we think and recognise and attend to those needs. Thank you.
Sorry, what I remember what I was going to say. So the other point is around the other work, that it's not necessarily just around the plans, it's also around like the quality of the advice and the guidance we give to schools to ensure that the kind of needs are met at that earlier stage, and also working with parents where perhaps we may have kind of refused to assess or we've refused to issue a plan, making sure that that support also sits alongside the pupil so they've got some clear advice and guidance to be able to improve that direction of travel.
So can I just, and Tony might correct me, but the safety valve programme or the historic deficit wasn't always linked to practice. I think it was about funding and actually the sort of structural funding for Hammersmith and Fulham put us at a disadvantage. So I just want to, we didn't embark on it with specific agenda to change things. We embarked on a specific, it was our transformation agenda was about meeting needs more effectively earlier.
I mean, I agree, like technically among yourself, that is the principle of safety valve, but I think among the recipients of the service, it can be highly misunderstood. So I think it almost, sometimes safety valve almost reads that this is a mission to reduce education, healthcare plans, but obviously it isn't. It is an arrangement, and it is a historic arrangement. But the general feeling among recipients of the service could be read as the council is trying to reduce education, healthcare plans, and that could create a bit of a difficult situation for parents. So this is just a comment, not a question exactly.
So I understand that, absolutely. And that's why when, I think we need to separate out safety valve from our transformation. And that's why at the outset, we were very clear with the DFE that we wouldn't be compromising on the quality of support. And I feel really proud of the work that's been done, but I take the point that you're making, Nandini, about the fears that people, the genuine fears that people have about what you know, with what's underlying that. But actually, I hope that investment in the early help, in that, in the early years, in the school system, actually sort of belies that fear.
And just to briefly add in, and I think some of the evidence for what Jackie's saying would also be seen in our very, very low rates of tribunal and very, very low rates of kind of mediation and complaints, etc. So although there will always be people who feel like the service has not kind of met their needs, the percentage of those, considering the numbers of young people with SEN and EHCs we have, is very low.
Thanks. I was just going to follow on to Jackie's point, really, in that the safety valve has allowed us to direct investment into the system. And if the safety valve hadn't been there, we'd have had less capacity within the funding envelope to make that investment. So safety valve has been really critical in that investment into the system and the early intervention that Jackie described.
And the other thing I'd want to say is part of the transformation agenda was to have more transparent governance. And we've had people like yourselves on our partnership boards, and that's been critical, as well as seeing a complete step change in the way that all stakeholders come together. And I made the point about working to common cause. I think we've seen that. And what is really striking is the passion and commitment. And nobody wants to shortchange children.
Great, thank you. Any other? I'm looking to the screen. See, Councillor Brown, if you want to come in. Any other? Other than that, I was going to move us on to just to double check I haven't missed something seismic, but are we moving from next year to the 3-year settlement still? Yeah.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Hope so. It'll be something we maybe come to later.
Government released a consultation on funding reform on the 18th of December, which set out plans for three-year multi-year settlements from 26-27 and a major overhaul of the whole funding system. I think that's quite an ambitious thing to meet, and obviously there's going to be a hell of a lot of work to actually happen in this current financial year to actually meet that. The consultation document was very much a kind of a sort of overarching intentions and objectives and aspirations. So there wasn't any numerical illustrations with it at all. So we've got a clear idea of what government wants to do. I think it's now seeing how that actually plays out, and there's obviously going to be quite a considerable consultation with the sector that's required. And just in terms of kind of how the budget cycle works, you know, we get our local government funding settlement at the moment in the middle of December. So we've got 11 months to kind of really overhaul the whole system, and that feels like quite a lot of work to happen. So I think it is really just seeing what happens and how it happens. Obviously, there's been a lot of commitment around technical consultations to come. but there's quite a bit of work to get through, and we'll obviously be keeping cabinet and cabinet involved and abreast of what happens.
What's the time of the consultation? When would you need to know, ideally, and not that we can?
Yeah, I mean, this is
ping
the
that
thing.
quickly
So,
to
I
them?
mean, obviously, the sort of like for as long as I can remember, actually, it's been that kind of almost like Christmas Day, kind of like literally. We got it on the 18th, I think it's the 18th of December this year, and I think that really we'd like sort of to be engaged in a different way, and I'm sure we and multi-year settlements is a part of that as well, so we can actually plan for more than a 12-month hamster wheel. And as I say, there are sort of like key engagement with bodies like Society of London Treasurers, which is all the finance directors in London. So there will be kind of technical people on being able to respond quite directly to this and be involved, and London councils as well, and the LGA and people like that. So there's going to be a lot of engagement with the sector and key stakeholders. But I suppose at the moment I'm sort of feeling that turnaround just feels quite tight to kind of change so much so quickly.
Yes, it would be very, I mean, not to create, hypothetical work of worst work of all, but it would be really interesting to see how you're reflecting on that, or what you are feeding through in the consultation about what that would mean for the service at a future, whichever one makes most sense.
I mean, I've
see that.
I've done a sort of a summary of the thing that we're just taking through SLT, and then we'll probably be taking it to political cabinet, I'd have thought. So you can see kind of as much as we can see in terms of the words, but it is very much seeing, well, what's because this is the distribution methodology. The spending review, which is expected in late spring, is actually sets the size of the cake and how much is there for local government. It's then this funding review which looks at how the cake is cut, and it's really that kind of meshing together of centrally allocated income, centrally allocated funding to local authorities, and money that it raises locally through council tax and business rates.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how we as Hammersmith and Fulham, how we fare within that, and a kind of an updated distribution methodologies across a number of different aspects of the funding system.
Yeah, that's it. Well, A-star answer.
Thank you.
Very thorough.
Yeah, I was obviously reading the funding reform document over Christmas, so
thrilling.
So it's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you very much. I mean, that's thanks. Yeah. Okay. Have we got? I'm looking to the screen just to check I haven't missed anything. Looking left and right. But other than that, I think that is everything for tonight. So I wanted to kind of sum up by saying congratulations on another balanced budget in hard times, and congratulations on the very high quality of service that you have great integrity in delivering, and specifically to the social worker and others who were recognised individually. That's brilliant. And I guess also to kind of come back to the beginning, the context of why we obviously talk about the budget kind of corporately and then zoom into children's is because the causality is really known in local authorities. Like we know that budget emerges then over here in terms of impact, and that's why we always talk about it from people online as well as a whole thing, and then we zoom into the kind of thematics of departments. So we will have the I should actually say, sorry, the recommendations. Do members agree that the committee considers the budget proposals and makes recommendations to cabinet as appropriate, and that the committee considers the proposed changes to fees and charges and makes recommendations for it to be approved as appropriate? Seeing a nod from Councillor Brown. Great, thank you very much. And so the date of the next meeting is going to be on the 22nd of April. And other than that, thank you very much for staying with us on a frosty evening, and thank you very much and good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.